For my first accessibility evaluation, I chose to do a Eureka Math mid-module assessment. This is a mid-module assessment for multiplying larger numbers. I just want to start by saying that typically for math, I give paper and pencil assessments. However, the year that I was teaching online, I needed to have digital assessments that the kids could do. So this is what I used. I didn't love it. This is done on Google Slides, and I have now, after examining the accessibility of Google Slides for math, realize why. Um, so, just to give you a little bit of background, I've actually found that almost all of my online assessments are Google Slides, Google Docs, and Google Forms. That's what I'm most comfortable with. So for my first evaluation, I'm going to do Google Slides, and then for my second one, I have a Google Doc that we'll talk about. But just to give you a little tour through this assessment here. So this is multiplying larger numbers. You can see that the kids with Eureka Math are given a lot of choices as to different strategies that they're taught and which ones they want to use for the assessment. The first page here, they're going to be dragging these area models, dropping and dragging into the correct, the ones that match the multiplication problem. For the second page, this is use any place value strategy to multiply. So for these 4 problems, they were taught different strategies of how to multiply the standard algorithm. They were taught using place value disks. They were taught with an area model, partial products. So they can just decide which strategy they want to use and solve it in the boxes, and then describe the strategy that they chose. The next page here goes into some word problems, again using the area models, and then there's a spot at the bottom for their work and their answer statement. Another word problem. Then this goes into area and perimeter a little bit. So again, it's in word problem form. This is how Eureka Math is set up. And then just the last 2 slides are just some more word problems. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of what the assessment looks like. So after reading the online accessibility handbook, I realized that Google Slides probably isn't the best option for math assessment. Math and science equations are formulas, and formulas can't be written to be accessible in Google Slides. So what I did after learning that I could click tools and accessibility, I now know that I can turn on the screen reader. So if I go here, we can click on the screen reader, turn on the screen reader, turn on the Braille, turn on the screen magnifier. I never knew that before, so that was exciting. I know that the slide layouts were changed when this assessment was made, so that's probably not good. We should try to use the slide formats that are the slide layouts that are presented there on when you originally go in. There are titles on each slide. They're all the same titles, so that was good. There aren't any lists on the test, so there was no need to do any bullet listing or any numerical listing. When I ran the accessibility checker, that was another story. I read that Grackle is a good one to use as a Chrome extension, but my school district has that blocked, so I wasn't able to use Grackle. I tried to use the Wave, and that came back an absolute mess. There were just symbols randomly all over the place, and I could at least tell there were some errors in there as far as accessibility, but boy, it was really hard to understand. But it did tell me that I had 20 missing table headers for this test. Now, they were saying that these area models were tables, which isn't really the case there. So this is a little bit different. I do know, however, that another downfall of Google Slides is that you can't create table columns or row headers. But that doesn't really apply here since these are technically area models. The checker also told me that I had 13 missing object descriptions where I should have added alternative text to the images. In looking through the slides, the images are really done very poorly with little descriptions of each. I just kind of have boxes, and I know that even when the kids took this assessment, I remember there being some confusion about where information was supposed to go. Another thing I should have done is utilize the notes section, which you can see down here is not touched. So I should definitely try to do that. Sorry. There is also no outline view in Google Slides. The accessibility checker also told me that there are 4 places I need to check the reading order. So I tried to tab through the slides, and with all these models, it is such a mess because of the text boxes and the area models everywhere. I would have to imagine that a screen reader would not work very well with this test. I examined the color contrast. So I obviously have black print on white background. So for someone that might be colorblind or have visual impairment, that would be good. The accessibility handbook mentioned navigation and how it should be clear and consistent so that students can focus on the content rather than how to find it. This assessment navigation probably isn't good. On slides 3 and 4, the students have to drag and drop area models. So right here, the directions, drag and drop. So that is probably not good because there's no option to use just the keyboard for students that might have a mobility issue and be unable to use a mouse. So pretty much as you heard and you can see, this math assessment is not very accessible. It actually wasn't very accessible for any of the students. It would not be my first choice. If I would probably make a lot of adjustments to it if I would ever use the digital form again. But like I said, on a normal year, I wouldn't be giving this assessment online. The kids would be using a paper and pencil assessment for the math. So the second resource that I chose to evaluate is an activity that we do in language arts called Mentor Sentences. The day before I would have done this lesson, I would have read a picture book. In this case, the picture book was called Twilight Comes Twice, which contained the mentor sentence for the week. The mentor sentence this week is right here on the screen. With invisible arms, dawn erases the stars from the blackboard of night. So this is the Google Doc that students would have accessed through Google Classroom to identify the parts of speech in the mentor sentence. That would be Tuesday's activity. So when it comes to accessibility, there aren't any headings on this doc, which probably makes it difficult for someone trying to use a screen reader. There are no images or lists. One of the main reasons I chose this resource is because of the table. Google Docs doesn't allow you to designate column or row headers, but I did test this with a tab key, and it did go left to right from top to bottom. I think the columns here are meant to be read vertically. Obviously, all the nouns are listed underneath, verbs. So I'm not sure how that would read back on a screen reader. That could be an issue. The color contrast is good with the white background and the black text for the visually impaired students. On this one, I also clicked accessibility under the tools and turned on the screen reader support, the Braille support, and the screen magnifier support. I have included at the bottom a glossary for the parts of speech as an accommodation for all students. I feel like the doc is clean and free of distractions for learners that might have ADD or just have trouble focusing. Rice had mentioned some of these things in the reading that we did. The navigation of this is clear. There's no content that's blinking, which would cause potentially seizures. There is a link on here to a read aloud of the book Twilight Comes Twice. And I did do a little bit of a description here of the link. I'm not going to do it, but if you click on that link, that's going to take you out to a YouTube read aloud of the book, which does have the captions on for the hearing impaired students or someone who might just be in a noisy environment. So I have learned so much from this assignment, and I've thought about things that I've never thought about before. In my 25 years of teaching, I've never had a visually impaired student because our visually impaired students are sent to the other elementary school in my district. I have had a few hearing impairments, but I've never had a deaf student. However, I have had many students who would benefit from some of the simple clicks that make these online assignments more user-friendly for all. I've learned a whole lot about accessibility and learned that I have a whole lot of work to do. It's really been eye-opening. And I've learned a lot. Thanks. Bye-bye.